Mystery fossils found. Mysterious fossils across America reignite debate over biblical Great Flood. Strange fossilized trees discovered across the United States are once again fueling intense debate about the one of the Bible's most famous story, the Great Flood described in the book of Genesis. Now let's take a deeper look and uncover every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
Imagine you're walking past this sheer, towering cliff face in a national park.
Right, like a massive rock wall.
Yeah, exactly. And you're looking at these distinct horizontal stripes of sedimentary rock stacked one on top of the other like this giant ancient layer cake.
The classic geological timeline, basically.
Right. And the traditional geological story tells you that this wall of rock represents, millions upon millions of years of slow, steady accumulation.
Dusting by dusting.
Exactly. But right in the middle of that rock wall, just slicing straight up vertically through time, is a perfectly preserved, petrified tree trunk.
Just completely defying the layers.
Standing entirely upright, frozen in solid stone. I mean, how does a dead tree manage to stand straight up for millions of years, just slowly waiting for dirt to bury it without completely rotting away first?
It's a massive contradiction.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. It's Friday, May 25th, 2026. And the mystery I just described, well, it's not a scene from a sci-fi movie.
No, it was very real.
Yeah, it's a very real, incredibly divisive geological phenomenon called a polystrate fossil.
Polystrate, meaning many layers.
Right. And today, our mission is to unpack a massive stack of recent articles and some absolutely explosive debates we've been tracking across social media platforms, especially on X.
The arguments there are getting pretty intense.
Oh, totally wild. These bizarre upright trees are currently causing this massive rift between mainstream science and biblical creationists.
And they both feel they have the physical proof.
Right. So we are going to impartially break down the core facts, extract the actual science from the sources, and give you, the listener, the tools to understand this debate without, drowning in all the furious online noise.
I think the visual you just painted is it's the absolute definition of a scientific paradox.
It really hurts the brain when you try to picture it.
Yeah, and to understand why a tree cutting through many layers is such a massive headache for traditional timelines, we kind of have to establish the baseline rules of the ground beneath your feet.
Okay, set the stage for us.
So historically, the field of geology has operated on this foundational principle called uniformitarianism.
Uniformitarianism. Okay, let's break that down for the listener. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it's essentially the idea that the present is the key to the past.
Okay.
It argues that the slow, steady geological processes we see happening today, like, say, a river slowly dropping silt or just wind blowing dust, are the exact same processes that formed the massive rock layers of the Earth over millions and millions of years.
So no sudden magical events, just the everyday stuff we see now.
Right. It's a model of extreme, uninterrupted gradualism. Just a tiny dusting of sediment year after year, century after century.
So if we apply that slow and steady rule, that uniformitarian rule, to our upright tree, the math just completely falls apart.
It totally shatters.
I mean, I want you listening to picture a dead tree in your local woods. If it takes hundreds of thousands of years for natural sediment to slowly build up a few dozen feet of rock around it, that tree is, well, it's completely exposed to the elements.
Yeah, the top half is just sitting right there in the open air.
Right. And long before the dirt ever piles up high enough to bury it, fungi will break it down. Insects are going to devour it.
The weather alone would destroy it.
Exactly. Oxygen and weather degrade the wood. A dead tree simply cannot stand at attention for 10,000 years waiting to be fossilized. It defies the most basic laws of biological decay.
And that contradiction right there is the engine driving this entire debate.
It has to be.
Because you cannot have a fragile biological organism outlasting the immense geological clock that's supposedly required to bury it.
Right.
And what makes this so much more complicated than just, a single weird anomaly is the sheer scale of the phenomenon.
Yeah. Our sources highlight this isn't just a one-off thing.
Not at all. Major examples of these polystrate fossils aren't hiding in one secret isolated cave somewhere. They're found all across the United States in really prominent, highly visited locations.
We're talking major national parks, right? Like Yellowstone National Park has them.
Yep, Yellowstone's a big one.
You can find them in Theodore Roosevelt National Park out in North Dakota and Ginkgo Petrified Forest State Park in Washington.
And the mining industry runs into them constantly.
Oh, right. The sources mentioned they've been uncovered by miners throughout massive coal fields spanning Tennessee, Kentucky, and Pennsylvania.
They're practically everywhere.
And they're a central feature at the Florissant Fossil Beds National Monument in Colorado.
So the geographical spread is just vast. You're looking at a widespread physical paradox.
Yeah.
And it continually forces geologists to explain how perfectly preserved organic matter ended up entombed in rock that supposedly took ages to form.
To put this in perspective for you listening, it's kind of like walking into your backyard and finding a perfectly fresh, bright orange, upright carrot shoved straight through the layers of a 10-year-old compost heap.
That is a great analogy.
It completely defies the timeline. I mean, if the compost took 10 years of slow decay to build up, how on earth did a fresh, pristine carrot get trapped vertically right in the middle of it?
It shouldn't be there.
Right. So I have to push back here. If the traditional, mainstream, slow and steady model says these rock layers take millions of years to form, how does mainstream science actually explain the carrot?
Or the tree, in this case.
Yeah. How do they explain the tree?
Well, mainstream geologists and paleontologists strongly reject the claim that these fossils are unexplainable.
Okay.
And they definitely reject that they break the larger timeline of Earth's history. To explain the upright trees, mainstream science has largely embraced this concept called neocatastrophism.
Neocatastrophism. So like a new look at catastrophes. How does that differ from the slow and steady rule?
It acts more as an addendum to the slow and steady rule.
Got it.
Mainstream science acknowledges that, yeah, while most of Earth's crust formed incredibly slowly, there were these intense, localized bursts of rapid, violent geological activity.
So disasters, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They argue that rapid burial happens constantly in nature, just on a local scale, not a global one. We're talking violent volcanic eruptions, massive mudslides, intense river flooding, or sudden swamp collapses.
Stuff that can move a ton of dirt fast.
Right. These events can mobilize millions of tons of earth and debris in literally a matter of hours.
So instead of a gentle dusting of dirt over an eon, it's a catastrophic dump of mud and rock all at once, localized to a specific valley or river basin.
And because that dump of mud happens so blindingly fast, a standing forest is suddenly inundated.
And just gets swallowed whole.
Yep. The trees are buried upright, instantly encased in an oxygen-deprived tomb of wet sediment before they have any chance to rot, be eaten by insects, or fall over.
Oh, so the oxygen gets cut off immediately.
Exactly. Then, over a very long period of time, the minerals from that surrounding sediment slowly seep into the wood, replacing the organic material cell by cell until you have a solid stone fossil.
Okay, I understand the theory. But if you're a geologist defending millions of years of Earth's history, you probably need more than just a theory, right?
You definitely do.
Do we have any modern proof that a local disaster can actually entomb a forest vertically like this?
We actually have dramatic, heavily documented modern proof.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. The prime example cited by mainstream experts in our sources is the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state.
Oh, Mount St. Helens. I remember seeing archival footage of that eruption. The devastation was just absolute. It leveled entire landscapes.
It was incredibly violent.
But how did an explosion create upright buried trees? I would imagine a volcano just flattens everything horizontally, like a bomb going off.
Well, it did flatten a lot of the forest. The blast wave was massive.
Right.
But the eruption also triggered these massive, hyper-fast volcanic mud flows called lahars.
Lavars. Okay.
Picture a river of wet concrete churning down the side of a mountain at highway speeds.
That is terrifying.
It really is. And these lahars ripped millions of massive trees straight out of the ground, just snapping them like twigs.
Wow.
And it carried them down into nearby Spirit Lake.
So you end up with a lake covered in a massive floating mat of dead, stripped logs.
Exactly. Now, here is where the physics of the burial get truly fascinating.
Okay.
As those stripped logs bobbed in the water over the following months and years, they began to become waterlogged.
Sure, they're soaking up water.
But a tree doesn't absorb water perfectly evenly. The root end of a tree is significantly denser and thicker than the top.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because of that heavy root mass, the bottom end of the log absorbed more water and became much heavier.
Oh, I see where this is going. The root end acts like a heavy lead weight on a fishing line.
It pulled the logs entirely upright.
Wait, really? Just floating vertically in the water?
Yes. Researchers watching Spirit Lake suddenly saw thousands of massive dead tree trunks bobbing completely vertically in the water like these giant floating telephone poles.
That's amazing.
And as they became fully saturated, they slowly sank, maintaining that perfect vertical orientation straight down into the muddy sediment at the bottom of the lake. And then subsequent mud flows and sediment drops just buried them deeper.
That is an incredible visual. So nature literally provided a blueprint.
A real-time demonstration.
Scientists watched a local disaster violently rip up a forest and mechanically plant it perfectly upright in layers of mud. This has to be a huge aha moment for you listening.
It's the linchpin of the mainstream argument.
Because mainstream geology doesn't actually claim that the sediment immediately surrounding these specific fossilized trees forms slowly.
No, they completely agree that the burial was an incredibly fast, violent event.
Right, they're just insisting that the event was highly localized, like a bad day in one specific valley, not a bad day for the entire planet.
Exactly. Mainstream geology views Earth's history as this long, quiet stretch of deep time, occasionally interrupted by these violent local hiccups.
A mudslide here, a flood there.
Right. A mudslide in Pennsylvania 100 million years ago. A volcanic eruption in Wyoming 50 million years ago.
So that local rapid burial mechanism explains the upright fossils perfectly well without needing to overthrow the entire geological timeline.
That's their stance, yes.
Okay, but here is the conceptual gap, and it's the core of the debate we are exploring today. This is where relying entirely on the Mount St. Helens model starts to face intense pushback.
Right, the scale issue.
Exactly. The mainstream model says these are isolated neighborhood-level events. But when you log on to X right now, there is an incredibly vocal group looking at these massive fossil fields across multiple states and continents.
And they are not buying the local disaster theory.
No, they're asking a very pointed question. How many local disasters does it take before you have to admit you are looking at a global one?
And this is where the controversy truly ignites. It represents a fundamental clash of interpretive frameworks.
Totally different lenses.
Exactly. If mainstream science looks at these widespread upright fossils and sees countless disconnected local accidents over millions of years, biblical creationists look at the exact same rocks and see the undeniable physical signature of a single planetary cataclysm.
And just to reiterate for you, our listener, our role today is not to take a side or tell you who is right. We're strictly acting as your guides here, just mapping out the claims from our source material so you can see the entire board.
Just sticking to the arguments.
Right. So let's look at that other side. The sources detail a massive recent push on social media by a group called Noah's Ark Scans. What exactly is their argument regarding these trees?
Well, the biblical creationist argument, championed by groups like Noah's Ark Scans, asserts that polystrate fossils are the direct physical aftermath of the Great Flood described in the book of Genesis.
Noah's Ark.
Yes. The Genesis account describes an event that goes far beyond just, a heavy rainstorm.
Right.
The text details 40 days and nights of torrential rain, coupled with the violent eruption of deep underground subterranean waters.
So water coming from above and below.
Exactly. It describes an unimaginably catastrophic churning event that fractured the earth, mobilized staggering amounts of sediment, and eventually covered the entire globe before the waters slowly receded.
So supporters of this flood theory are looking at these upright trees cutting through rock layers in Washington, Pennsylvania, and Colorado.
All over the place.
Right, and they are saying this perfectly matches the massive rapid sediment dump that a global disaster of that scale would produce.
And they argue that the physical evidence left behind just cannot be explained by standard local river floods or mudslides.
It's too big.
Yeah. The sources highlight the work of prominent creation scientist Ian Juby.
Right, Juby.
Juby spends his time looking for specific physical anomalies at these geological crime scenes. Anomalies, he argues, are only possible in a chaotic, planet-wide cataclysm.
Wait, I need to stop you there, because I understand a mudslide covering a tree. I can picture that. But what specific anomalies is Ian Juby pointing to that break the mainstream Mount St. Helens model?
He's looking at the fine details.
What is he actually seeing in the rock?
Well, Juby points out that many of these fossilized forests exhibit highly chaotic, violent characteristics. First off, he points to the root systems.
Okay, the roots.
In many polystrate fossils, the roots aren't peacefully preserved in soil. They are violently snapped off and broken.
Oh, meaning the trees didn't just quietly drown in a rising swamp right where they grew.
Exactly. They were physically ripped out of the ground with immense force.
So that implies moving water, a lot of it.
Right. And furthermore, Jupi highlights the existence of upside-down polystrate trees.
Wait, upside down?
Trunks preserved perfectly vertically, cutting through multiple layers of rock, but completely inverted, so the roots are pointing up to the sky.
An upside-down tree slicing through solid rock. I mean, intuitively, that does sound like the aftermath of massive, chaotic violence.
It's a very difficult thing to visualize naturally.
Yeah. Because if a heavy root ball makes a log float right side up in a lake, like we just talked about at Mount St. Helens, how does mainstream geology explain an upside-down tree?
Well, a mainstream geologist might argue that a particularly violent lahar could tumble a top-heavy tree and wedge it upside down into thick mud.
Okay, kind of flipping it over.
Right. But Juby and other creationists argue that the sheer volume of these anomalies, combined with deeply compressed plant material that sometimes extends continuously through several different distinct rock layers.
So it's weaving through the layers.
Yes. They argue all that points to something much bigger than a mudslide.
Our sources actually mention he points to a specific location to prove this massive scale, right? The Joggins Fossil Cliffs.
Yes, the Joggins Fossil Cliffs in Nova Scotia. It's a major focal point for this debate.
What's there?
It is a massive coastal cliff face featuring these thick, stacked layers of upright trees, and they often intersect with enormous compressed coal seams.
A lot of plant matter, basically.
Tons of it. Juby argues that the sheer volume of squeezed, crushed plant matter spanning across multiple sedimentary layers at Joggins just cannot be the result of a local river flooding its banks.
It's just too much volume.
Exactly. He argues it is the signature of unimaginably massive churning floodwaters ripping up entire continental forests, matting them together, and just slamming them down under millions of tons of rapid sediment.
To synthesize this for you listening, looking at the exact same Joggins cliff face, mainstream science sees millions of years of cyclical local swamp floods building up over deep time.
Right, routine local events.
But creationists look at those broken roots, the upside-down trunks, and those massive compressed coal seams, and they see the aftermath of one single, violent, planet-wide washing machine.
The planet-wide washing machine is a very vivid, yet conceptual, accurate way to describe the catastrophic flood model they're proposing.
What's wild to me is that these two worldviews, millions of years of scattered local accidents versus a single year of global biblical catastrophe, they seem so impossibly far apart.
They're completely opposed.
How do they even sit at the same table to debate? But the sources keep pointing to the fact that the key referee in this debate isn't a creationist at all.
No, not at all.
They keep bringing up a highly respected mainstream British geologist named Derek Ager. Why is a group advocating for Noah's flood constantly quoting a mainstream scientist?
Because of Derek Ager's intellectual honesty about the math.
The math, okay.
And his willingness to challenge the strictest dogmas of his own field. Ager was an emeritus professor at University College Swansea. And you are correct, he was absolutely not a biblical creationist.
Right.
But he looked at the traditional slow and steady uniformitarian model of geology, and he applied it directly to the physical reality of polystrate fossils.
He did the actual math on the burial rate.
He did. Ager noted that if sediment truly accumulated at the traditionally accepted, extremely slow and constant rate, burying a single 33-foot tree could theoretically take hundreds of thousands of years.
Let's do some back-of-the-napkin math for the listener to really visualize this.
Okay, let's do it.
If standard geological theory says sediment builds up at a rate of, say, 1 millimeter a year.
Which is pretty standard.
Right. A 33-foot tree is about 10,000 millimeters tall, so that means it would take 10,000 years just to bury that one tree from root to tip.
Yep.
But a dead tree completely rots and falls apart in a forest in, a decade or two?
Usually faster, yeah.
The math is undeniably catastrophically broken.
And Ager explicitly called the idea completely unrealistic.
Good for him.
He stated the obvious biological fact. You cannot have a 33-foot tree waiting patiently for an eon to be buried.
Right.
So Ager concluded that some sedimentation events, specifically the ones forming these polystrate fossils, must have occurred incredibly rapidly in massive catastrophic dumps.
Which perfectly aligns with the neocatastrophism model we discussed earlier.
Yes, but here is the critical observation Ager made and why creationists quote him so often.
Oh, what did he say?
He noted that this unimaginably rapid sedimentation must have happened even when the surrounding rock layers appear visually continuous, flat, and uniform.
Wait, really think about what that means. Even if a rock wall looks exactly like it took millions of years of gentle millimeter by millimeter dusting to build up into perfect horizontal stripes.
Which is how they teach it.
Right. The presence of that one vertical tree proves that those specific layers were actually slammed down wet all at once in a geological blink of an eye.
That is the inescapable conclusion Ager reached. The rock layers lie to you about how long they took to form.
Wow.
And creationists frequently cite Ager's writings because he, a mainstream expert, validated their core physical claim.
That catastrophic, rapid geological processes are real.
Yes, that they can mimic slow geological time, and they are undeniably recorded in the rocks.
Isn't it fascinating how the exact same scientific observation that these trees had to be buried in an absolute flash is used as the foundational proof for two completely opposite versions of Earth's history?
It's the exact same data.
For you listening, think about how often you see this dynamic in your daily life. You scroll through social media, you see a viral post, you see thousands of people screaming at each other in the comments.
Everyone is so sure they're right.
Yeah. And when you actually pause, strip away the anger, and look at the underlying science, you realize both sides are actually agreeing on the raw data.
Yes.
In this case, both mainstream geology and biblical creationists look at an upright fossil and completely agree. Yes, this burial was violently fast.
There's no argument there anymore.
They agree on the data, but they are going to absolute war over the scale.
It is a perfect case study in how scientific discourse functions in the public sphere.
It really is.
It highlights that raw data doesn't speak for itself.
Yeah.
It is always filtered through a broader interpretive framework.
The lens you view the world through.
Exactly. The tree itself is an objective fact.
Yeah.
The extreme speed of its burial is a mechanical deduction both sides now agree on. The mechanism responsible for that speed, whether it's millions of years of scattered local disasters versus a single violent global flood, that is where the interpretive frameworks fatally clash.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill the true nature of this debate for our listener. When they see this pop up online tomorrow, what is the core takeaway?
I'd say the essential takeaway is that the real controversy surrounding polystrate fossils is no longer about speed.
Okay.
The days of geologists arguing that these trees stood around for tens of thousands of years waiting to be gently covered in dust, well, those days are over. The math killed that theory.
Both sides agree the burial was rapid.
Exactly. The debate exploding online today is strictly about scale and history.
Scale and history.
Were those rapid burials the result of countless isolated local natural disasters spread out over vast ages of geological deep time? Or, as Ian Juby and Noah's Ark scans argue, are these fossil graveyards the widespread physical evidence of a single massive global catastrophe remembered in ancient biblical history?
Wow.
That is the line drawn in the sedimentary rock.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. Our goal was to take you past the viral headlines and the shouting matches and really equip you with the actual mechanisms of the debate.
Give you the real science behind it.
Right, from uniformitarianism and Lahar's to Derek Ager's math. So the next time a picture of an upright, fossilized tree pops up on your feed, you are perfectly equipped to understand exactly what the argument is really about.
And why it matters so much.
Yeah, why it holds such massive implications for how we view the history of our planet. But before we go, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
Something that builds directly on what we've unpacked today. We talked extensively about how a single, localized natural event like the catastrophic 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens can instantaneously freeze a forest in time.
Completely bury it upright.
Right. It left behind a landscape of bobbing vertical logs and rapid mud layers that looks exactly like the chaotic aftermath of a massive biblical cataclysm.
It mimics it perfectly.
Yeah. So if a local event can perfectly mimic a global catastrophe in the geological record, it makes you wonder how many other quote-unquote local disasters in Earth's deep history are currently hiding in the rocks, completely blurring the line between a neighborhood accident and a planetary reset.
That is a fascinating question.
Keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. Could the mysterious upright fossilized trees found across America actually be evidence supporting the biblical story of Noah's great flood? Or are scientists overlooking something important? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.